family, and my mother moved here and brought us kids in 1900. And incidentally, I think brought the first herd of thoroughbred cattle is ever brought into Oklahoma during that year.
That's an interesting.
She brought 15 head of thoroughbred shorthorn cattle and a bull, 15 heifers and a bull. I expect if there's any way to find out, that's the first thoroughbred cattle that ever came into Oklahoma.
Well, it's a good matter, and I think we can double-check back with it somehow and establish that as a fact. That's interesting, extremely so. Well, she had her hands full with 9 children.
That's right.
I imagine that the majority of the 9 children then went right to work, right?
That's right. That's all of us ever did was work.
Well,
we had to work to eat.
You were the youngest?
Yes.
What'd you do? Well, naturally, with the cattle brought in, you got into raising cattle, right?
That's right.
Was it?
We used to carry these thoroughbred bulls and bring them up here and sell them, and if we got $45 for them, we was lucky.
Mm-hmm. Where'd you live when you first came here, Paul?
We lived 3 miles east of Choctaw on East 23rd Street.
East 23rd?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've talked with any number of, well, you might say your contemporaries, and those were pretty rugged days, weren't they, back then?
Yes, they were.
But as a child or a youngster, I don't imagine that it affected you too much that way. It was just a way of life, wasn't it?
Well, yes, and of course, our mother was very much interested in our education, so she moved to Oklahoma City and along about statehood, so us kids could go to school here in Oklahoma City. And when we first came here, we lived on the farm, and then we moved to town and kept the farm and migrated back and forth from town to the city for educational purposes.
Where'd you go to school?
Well, I went to Emerson, old Emerson School up here, where I started out, and then Central High School, and went in the service after I finished high school.
That was a pretty quick one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
How long were you in service?
About 4 years, a little less than 4 years. I joined when I was 17 years old, joined the Navy, and got out when I was 21, so.
And you came back to try and make a living.
That's right.
What was your first job?
My first job was in the coffee business.
Coffee?
Western Pacific Tea Company. I started work with them on September the 1st, 1950. And worked for them for 4 years. And September the 1st, 1919, while they were a chain store, our operation had, I think, 6 or 7 stores, one of them here. And on September the 1st, 1919, I bought their branch store here and entered in the coffee business myself and have been in it ever since, up until about 4 years ago when we sold out.
You sure have been into it. You started in it and you stayed in it.
That's right.
You say you bought their chain store that was here in Oklahoma City?
Right.
Now, did that was that just the retail or
It was retail and institutional business. Institutional is hotel and restaurant.
And then you got into to the processing of your own coffee then, right?
That's right. Immediately after I acquired the business, I got into processing the coffee.
Where was that located, Mr. Cain?
Well, when I bought them out, we were located at 120 North Robinson, right where we're sitting now.
Right here?
Yeah. And from there we moved up on 2nd Street, just off of Robinson, and then in 1927 I built a building at 512 West 2nd, 3-story brick building with some parking area next to it for the operation of our business. And then we lost our railroads, as you remember, along in the early 30s, and
right.
We stayed there and trucked our coffee from the railroads in there until 1940. 1940 we moved up to 12th and Santa Fe, the old Cypress Candy Company building up there. And stayed there until 1960.
And you built the new facility out
The new facility was built by our successors, who we sold out to.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We were 20th, or we were at 12th and Santa Fe about 12 years, or 22 years rather.
Mm-hmm. Oh, boy, that's quite a history in chronological form. Is staying in one business right through your business activity life, you might say.
We built our business from nothing, you might say. In our last year that we were in business, we then did a little over $19 million.
How many employees did you have when you started here?
I just had one.
Just yourself?
Yeah.
It's a rather interesting business, isn't it?
Yes, it is very interesting. We got into the importing business almost immediately after we acquired the business from the Western Pacific Tea Company.
Mm-hmm.
And all of our merchandise was imported. Coffee, tea, and spices were our main items, and they were all imported items. So we were very imported practically all of the merchandise that we sold.
Well, and you were the
from the
first
producing countries.
First one here, then, weren't you?
No, there was a couple other small companies here, about like ours, that have since gone out of business.
Mm-hmm. Well, you built it to quite a size before you did sell out, however, though, didn't you?
Well, we were fortunate just to have, based on per capita consumption of coffee, which present time is about 17 pounds per capita. We were selling better than 60% of all the coffee sold in the state of Oklahoma when we sold out.
Yeah, but your territory was more than Oklahoma, though, wasn't it?
Yes, we covered 5 states finally. Originally it was just Oklahoma.
Uh-huh.
And we went into Arkansas, Missouri, Texas, and Kansas. And we did business in 5 states. We established a branch in Tulsa, was our first branch, and then Wichita, and St. Louis, and Corpus Christi. We had branches in all 4 of those areas.
Any of the Cain family still connected with the coffee company now?
No.
Just the name is...
That's all.
The name will remain, however.
That's right. We sold the privilege to use the name with the business.
During the course of coming out of the Army, starting in the coffee business and its gradual build up to the time you sold it, you were busy in other activities too, I'm sure of that.
Well, I was always very much interested in our Chamber of Commerce here, and I really began to take an active part along about the same time I went in business in 1919. I remember very distinctly we had a new branch of the Chamber of Commerce we called the Pogo Club.
Pogo?
The letters meant produce or get out. And I think it was Stanley Draper's idea. He came here and started in with the Chamber of Commerce about the same time I started in business in 1919.
Uh-huh.
So I think he was the originator of the Pogo Club, and I think served as its first president.
That sounds a little like Stanley
And
Draper.
that went along for several years and finally disintegrated. I don't even remember what happened to it, but I served as president originally when it first started.
Well, it obviously served its purpose as far as implementing activity and interest in the Chamber.
Well, it certainly grew me to the Chamber of Commerce. I think we've got the finest Chamber of Commerce in the world, and has done. If it hadn't been for our Chamber of Commerce here, we'd probably still be another Guthrie.
That seems to be the consensus, not only of people here who are well aware of what could not have happened without the Chamber, but also around the country and around the world, as a matter of fact, because the Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce is really an internationally recognized chamber group. Well, you were president of the Chamber. Of course, that was later on. You obviously served in many capacities as you came up the ladder.
Yes, I've always been very active in the Chamber of Commerce. I served as its president in 1951, 52, and 53 for 3 years.
Another subject I'm certain is quite close to your heart and also to your working hands and mind is the water for Oklahoma and Oklahoma City. How did you get interested in that, other than the fact that it is an absolute necessity?
Well, Bob Kerr was the originator of that idea when he was first governor of Oklahoma, and then it was continued on, and the real activity started with the formation of the Oklahoma Water Foundation in about 1957, and I think I've served as president ever since. The foundation of that organization. This organization is promoted by the businessmen of Oklahoma City, and there's primarily somewhere around 475 or 500 contributors to the program, and have been through the years, and our budget is run as high as $90,000 per year for the promotion of the Water Foundation. And of course, I think that it's the most important thing that we've ever tried to do economically for central Oklahoma, because it means with water transportation in the central Oklahoma, it means that we will be competitive with other port locations, and we'll attract industry that needs to get out of the east. There's getting so very crowded in the east, and of course the first project of this kind was the whole Ohio Valley, which has been largely built up, and there's not too much room left along the Ohio Valley, and this is an ideal place. I think we have everything that the Ohio Valley has, plus fuel. We have gas, oil, that the Ohio Valley doesn't have. And of course we have our good labor supply in this area, and I think we have everything the Ohio Valley has.
We even have some coal in this state, don't we?
We have a tremendous amount of coal, and it's never been economically feasible to get to export it out of this country, but for the simple reason the freight eats it up. But with the barge transportation, we can mine and transport coal out of here.
Was that Senator Kerr, one of Senator Kerr's, or was it his original idea? I know he was always close to getting water and more water and adequate water for Oklahoma. Was he the spearhead behind many of these movements?
Yes, to best of my knowledge, he was. This idea originated during the time he was governor, and I can vividly remember the first meeting we had on it at the Chamber of Commerce, in which it was endorsed, and of course it's more than just barge transportation that we were thinking about originally. When the thing was first brought up, they were talking about bringing great supplies of water from southeastern Oklahoma, where we have abundant water supply, into central Oklahoma. And we finally arrived at a quantity of 2 billion gallons of water a day. And so the engineer said, well, if you're going to have 2 billion gallons of water a day, you might as well have it in an open canal and float some barges on it. So that's really where the idea of the barge traffic came from.
So it was an outgrowth of the necessity of having water for facilities here, just normal facilities, and it sort of grew from there.
That's right. And of course, you go back to the time of Lake Overholser when it was built. Why, you hear a great many of our citizens say, well, our water problems are taken care of forever. And of course, we all know that we outgrew Lake Overholser almost overnight. Then when we built Lake Hefter, why, they say, well, now we've really got it taken care of. And we all know that overnight again, why, we were short on water. And the quality of it is not too good, and so the next step was a pipeline to Okla. And of course, then again, people says, well, now we're really picked up. We don't need to worry about water anymore. And I think we can all see the day, which is not too far off, when we will again need to supplement our water supply. And the Water Foundation, excuse me, the Water Foundation has that problem well in hand, and the Army engineers have designated a freshwater canal that is not connected with the navigation canal. It's a separate entity.
Mm-hmm.
To bring 1 billion gallons of water at a cost of less than 5 cents a thousand gallon into central Oklahoma, and that's a pretty good bargain.
That would seem so. Where would that water emanate?
It would emanate in the southeastern Oklahoma area.
Mm-hmm. That seems to be a richly endowed area with water, isn't it?
Well, most of it goes down the Red River and into the Gulf now, and none of it is captured for domestic use in Oklahoma.
How could that be brought up here? Would that be piped in too, or just as you
Well,
said?
the cheapest way to bring it is an open canal,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be brought in an open canal. See, the volume of water that the engineers explained to me, the friction of trying to bring water in pipe is it requires an awful lot more power, and you can bring several times as much water with the same amount of power in an open canal, an open ditch.
There still has to be a pumping process.
That's
though.
right. But it simplifies it because it's an open ditch and you don't get into the friction problem.
Isn't there any water north or northeast or northwest of us that we could bring in by gravity flow?
No, not in quantities that we're thinking about. Of course, we're thinking about at least 1 billion gallon a day and probably 2 billion gallon a day.
Well, that sort of underscores the apparent enthusiasm and the obvious drive that's been in the minds of you and your contemporaries, the people who came here almost, you might say, at the inception of the city, that we haven't really got a start yet.
Well, that's true, and of course, the water supply in the canal is, as the engineers, the Army engineers have worked it out, is two different projects at the present time. The most feasible way and the most economical way to bring the Barge Canal into Oklahoma City is down the Deep Fork River route.
Mm-hmm.
And the saving is somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million over any other route. And it's much more feasible and much more practical to do it that way. But it's impossible to bring the water by that route. For the simple reason that it originates much farther south.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be two projects. And of course, the canal, we're very much interested in getting it activated and in operation by 1970 at the same time the Arkansas River is completed.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the reason why that is essential is because that we're going to be sitting here between Dallas and Fort Worth and Tulsa, and Dallas and Fort Worth are turning handsprings to get the Trinity River navigable into Dallas and Fort Worth, and if we don't get, we've got to have our project finished in early 1970 to be competitive with those other two areas.
What's our status as of today, can you say?
Well, we've been making very rapid progress on it, and it's very encouraging. The Army engineers have recommended it, and it's now before the engineers of Rivers and Harbors in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And we have given them some additional information. We have a very fine report, and I think it will be approved not later than April of this year,
Mm-hmm.
probably sometime in March. And then it goes to the Bureau of the Budget for funding and the Congress for authorization.
Mm-hmm.
And with all of our delegation pushing very hard for it, I don't anticipate too much difficulty in those categories.
Well, there seems to be a unified front as far as our congressional delegation.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Well, we need it to exist, don't we?
We've got to have it. In other words, there's paper industries and steel industries that could very conceivably be interested in coming in here, use as much water almost as Oklahoma City does.
Mm-hmm. Go right ahead. Well, I've heard some people around the city say that the way the situation is now and the demands of the economic advancement of the city in every form. Water could even be more important than oil.
Well, with water, you don't have anything. You can have oil, labor, everything else in the world, but if you don't have an abundant supply of water, why, you're absolutely sunk, because everything emanates from water.
We still have to get back to nature, don't we?
That's right.
Mother Nature. I recall in some of the initial presentations of our own waterways, say, using the Deep Fork, that would enhance not only the value of property all along the Deep Fork, but also the various communities that it brushes by from here, say, over to Tulsa.
Well, it's a very interesting study. You know, you hear so many people say, well, with all these dams and everything that you're building, you're destroying so much good land up and down the valleys. Well, of course, that is a point, but it isn't nearly as important as the water that's stored in those areas. And the Deep Fork area will reclaim over 36,000 acres of the finest land in the state of Oklahoma that's been flooded ever since anybody's known anything about it. It will reclaim more than 36,000 acres of land, which will offset much of the inundated land that we've had in some of the other reservoirs.
It'll really make it productive.
And the land that isn't worth anything now, that doesn't produce anything, will be fine land and will be in production when be on the tax rolls. And that isn't any small body of land, more than 36,000 acres.
No, it could be very productive, and also the commercial possibilities along the river or along the canal.
That's right.
Now, presently, they envision the westernmost terminus near Luther, isn't it?
Yes, Luther, Arcadia, in that area.
Which is practically Oklahoma City.
Well, it is Oklahoma City.
Adjacency.
Under our expansion program and annexation, port will be in Oklahoma City. Unless the Supreme Court, there's an effort now to destroy our annexation program, but I doubt if it will be. And if it stands up, it's been okayed by a lower courts and some of the interested parties carried the Supreme Court, but if the Supreme Court upholds the annexation problem in Oklahoma City, the port will be in Oklahoma City. And of course, that's the place for it, because it has to be locally financed. The port does. And Oklahoma City is the only place that's capable of doing it financially.
There doesn't seem to be any question about that, as opposed to a smaller community, and they just can't.
Well, of course, you're talking about several $1 million for a port.
I would think so. I would think so. Many millions of dollars.
That's right. And it isn't feasible to have the port located in any place except in Oklahoma City.
Well, a facility such as that, in connection with the refurbishment that's planned, and I think we all earnestly hope takes place for the central city area, the core of Oklahoma City, it's going to certainly put a new complexion on this town within the next 20, 30 years, isn't it?
Well, certainly industry are already making inquiries about our project here, and we have wonderful opportunities here for the paper industry. We have abundant timber in the southeastern part of the state, and we have the coal industry can be developed here. We have some of the finest coal in the world right here, and millions and millions of tons of it, and all we need is transportation to get it out. We have oil and gas facilities here for fuel that, as I said a while ago, that the Ohio Valley doesn't have.
Yes.
And we have a good labor supply here. It's interesting to note that the Goodrich Rubber Company that built a plant in Miami, Florida, say that they have the greatest per man production in Oklahoma they have any place they operate. And that's a pretty good recommendation.
Over in Miami, Oklahoma.
Yeah.
It keeps you busy with your many activities, doesn't it?
I have a lot of fun on it.
I'll bet you do. You seem to enjoy it. You bear up well under it.
Well, I'm not much of a warrior.
The Urban Action Foundation is another one of your activities that I know is deeply engrossed in the workings of the city and the advancement of the city.
Well, yes, of course, I was elected president of the Oklahoma Action Foundation a few months ago, and I've been very much interested in it from its inception. And of course, the Urban Action Foundation is merely the local arm of the Urban Renewal Authority, which is of Washington, D.C., and has an office here. But the Urban Action Foundation is a group of about 75 leading businessmen in Oklahoma City that are interested in doing something about our downtown area and our slum areas, and particularly our university area out here, developing a fine medical center out in that area and changing the face of our downtown area, which they both are badly needed. And the purpose of the Urban Action Committee is to promote these projects and see that they get on the road at the earliest possible date.
I suspect that since Oklahoma and Oklahomans, I think a lot of people have noticed that there's a great independent nature among the people out here. They like to do a lot of things in themselves, and only on rare occasions and by dint of necessity will they accept any help. Have you found that in your Urban Action Foundation, your workings with the various people, it's been difficult to convince them that there is such a thing as participation by other forms of government?
Well, I think they have a better conceived idea about how the different government responsibilities fit into one another. And this quoting Stanley Draper, one of his favorite expression is that we want to write these books, not just read them. So in talking about development of communities, we get many suggestions and many ideas, and some of them are good and some of them not so good. And of course his theory is we ought to write the books instead of, so that kind of bears out your statement of independent thinking in Oklahoma. And last week I was in Washington and met with Bill Slayton, who is head of the Urban Renewal Authority in Washington, and he made the comment that we had the most progressive plan that he'd seen in any place in the United States. And I think that speaks well for the Urban Action Foundation and what they're trying to do in promoting the local interest in the program.
Well, the university area is going to be a magnificent complex when that is completed, and that's pretty well along the way, isn't it?
University Hospital?
Yes,
yes.
University Hospital.
Well, of course, it's, there's...
at least the preliminaries.
Yes, it's the first one, and it's practically ready to go. We ought to, before the year's out, we ought to be clearing ground out there and really get it in operation. Of course, there's been some new thinking with reference to that. Our new Dean of Medicine here, Dean of the Medical School, is very much interested in a teaching hospital in connection with the university program. And that's getting a lot of attention at the present time. For instance, the Presbyterian Hospital are thinking seriously about locating their facilities out there.
Well, we could in time have the Southwest Medical Center, you might say, for this area.
We have an opportunity to have a medical center that's second to none in the Southwest. And we have the facilities, and all we need is a little excuse me, a little breathing room out there, a little space. And I think under urban renewal that can be acquired and set aside for the project. We're thinking about a project that extends clear on down to 4th Street to accommodate a real medical center out there that would have a private teaching hospital in it, and the facilities that contribute, all the facilities that contribute to a medical center. There's many satellite industries that need to be located in that area for the benefit of the medical center.
Mm-hmm. And the overall plan would include those
Yeah.
small businesses and
That's
so
right.
forth necessary. This overall plan is compatible with our projected pay plan for the redevelopment of downtown Oklahoma
That's
City.
right, yes.
Mhm. Well, that's an ambitious project, and I think it's creating a great deal of interest and stimulating a great deal of sound thinking around the city.
Well, it's a case for necessity, and of course the pay plan is just a method of accomplishing what we all know has to be accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I haven't seen anything that to me looked better than the pay plan. And some people say point out some things that might be wrong with it, but they don't have anything to substitute in suggestion. In other words, it's pretty easy to say, well, something's wrong, but you should have something constructive to come up with that's better, in my thinking.
Yeah, you should have some alternative.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. I suspect that during the course of your business activities and your business life, and which has been so closely intertwined with your civic activities, that been some rather interesting incidents take place. Can you recall any that has really stuck in your mind of any sort that we could put down just as a matter of record?
Well, well, of course, there's instances every day as you go along, but all the Chamber of Commerce efforts over the year have been progressive efforts, and certainly there's been many instances. I don't recall any just particularly, except the Pogo Club I mentioned some time ago, which was really an activity that was started back in 1919 and 20 and progressed along for the years, and there's been many activities that are almost too numerous to mention as far as activities the Chamber is concerned. They've been very outstanding. I don't know of anything that's ever came up that was for the benefit of the city that the Chamber hasn't taken the lead in it and organized the effort to get the job done.
And they seem to be gathering steam each year.
I think that's right. That should. Of course, we're growing and getting larger, and and the opportunities are greater, and there's more of them.
I think it's a universal feeling in talking with you and some of the other men and some of the women who have been very instrumental in the building of our city that man Draper has really been he's been a stemwinder. And he is, rather. Not
There's only one like him in the world, and he's demonstrated his ability to get the job done, I think, more than anybody I know of.
As I understand, Mr. Overholzer brought him here, wasn't
Yes, he was, Ed Overholzer was active head of the Chamber when Stanley came here in 1919, and Ed died just a few months after Stanley came here, and of course he went right in as a young man to executive director of the Chamber of Commerce and has been ever since.
Well, that's been his life.
That's right.
It is his life. We hope very shortly to be able to sit down, and I think it's going to take a full day and many reels of tape.
Yeah, I think you're right.
If we can interrupt his busy day, catch him on one of those days when he only has about 50 appointments instead of 100. Because I'm certain that he could really help us record the history of the city from...
Better than anybody I know of. He knows more of the details and more of the actions, more of the people involved, and has more intimate knowledge than anybody that I know of. But
I think it was a great source of satisfaction to many people. I'm sure it was to him, although he looked a bit embarrassed the day that Draper Lake was dedicated to him.
yeah.
That is a beautiful spot out there.
He is one man that doesn't seek reward or honor particularly, but his ambition is to get the job done. That's his criteria.
Well, Draper Lake is the facility here that's at this end of the Okla pipeline.
That's right. It's a storage facility.
Mm-hmm. It's filling up quite rapidly, too, isn't it?
Yes, I don't think they haven't made any effort to fill it completely full. Of course, I've been anxious for them to get it filled because I want to see how it looks when it's full. And I think it'd be a awful good advertisement and something that everybody would like to see, and that is see it kept full all the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, even in at its present state, any number of people are out there all the time.
Yeah.
It's getting to
It's
be
a very beautiful body of water.
isn't it? And it's attracting so many enthusiasts of outdoor activity.
Yeah. Well, I think we had a fellow down here from New York a short time ago who was interested in community development, and he just was amazed at the opportunity around Draper Lake for a home development out there, and with a new crosstown expressway and the opportunity to get downtown in a hurry from that area, why he thought it had great possibilities as a high-class residential area out there around the lake. And I think he may have something.
I've heard that expressed even by some of our local people. And particularly the women look at it that way. They say, what a magnificent place to have a home. They like the various fingers off of the lake that it gives a certain amount of privacy, and still you have you're overlooking the water. It's wooded, and if it's handled properly and we don't bulldoze all the trees off of there, it would be all right.
I think it has a great possibility for the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we get to be 1 million people, population in metropolitan Oklahoma City, which is not too far off, by a development of that kind could lend itself very easily to this community and be a step in the right direction.
As a matter of fact, I would suspect that if we get close to 1 million, that's going to be a necessity.
I
Wouldn't
think
you
so.
feel?
And I think it's an opportunity. I think we've got the facility to take care of the people that will make up that population.
Mm-hmm. Well, you certainly haven't lost any enthusiasm through your hard work and activity through the years.
Well, you know, a lot of people talk about hard work. To me, I get a lot of pleasure out of everything I do. So when you approach it from that standpoint, I don't think you get tired and worn out with it, because every day is a new challenge almost.
Hmm. What do you generally then you see? Your optimism is rather obvious, but do you see any real stumbling blocks in our way to keep on going as we have been as a city?
No, I don't. I think we just started. I think we have the greatest opportunity of any city in the country. And I think we're demonstrating that as we go along all the time. If we can get this canal in here, I'm not going to say if we get in here, I say when we get it in here, we're going to have the greatest industrial complex in the country right here in Oklahoma City.
What's the target date on that?
1970.
That's not too far away.
I didn't.
Well, the rewards here in the city seem to be great, in that association with other people has contributed greatly to our success and to our growth.
Well, I think that's true.
I suppose because it's peculiar in the fact that it is a young city, isn't it?
Yes, that's one advantage we have, I think. We can do so much more with our city because it is a young city than so many of the older cities can, because we still have the open space here to spread out and do something with our community that really means something, and a great many of the larger cities and the older cities can't do because they don't have the area.
Even our downtown area, despite the fact that we're fairly well built up with some rather substantial buildings, the some that are that don't meet today's standards, they're substandard in essence, can be replaced without too much of disjointed.
We have many fine buildings that can be retained, and of course it's surrounded with new facilities that are modern in aspect and design and are commercially sound, that would mean so much more to the community than what we have at the present time. And if we don't, and it's absolutely essential.
Well, I think we've covered quite a range in activities around the city in which you've been engaged, and even though it's covered a few years, you seem just getting a toehold yourself.
Well, I was talking the other day about our hospital, Presbyterian hospital program out here, and I said that I was looking at it from a standpoint of 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can look at any sort of a specific project like a hospital and any other.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. I hope he does take care of himself. It's difficult for him to do it. He just
can't stay still, you know.
No, he just keeps going all the time, keeps running. But he sure, there's the real asset.
They don't make any more like it.
I think it's another motivating factor in getting everything that we can civically and for the city and the metropolitan area on the go.
Yeah.
And at least get it moving.
Mm-hmm.
So our momentum will carry us on. Well, I know the college appreciates this, Mr. Cain, that we can get your expressions and your comments on record so that it can be used as...
Well, I think it's a wonderful program, and of course, I think we're all very grateful for the Christian College. It's been certainly a wonderful asset addition to Oklahoma City, and I think their progressive attitude out there has been a tremendous help, and will be more help as we go along. I think it's a fine institution.
I was naturally acquainted with it in the news business in various facets, and it's always been an attractive philosophy that they've had as far as their progressive education. And now the physical plant is starting to take shape out there. This, where these tapes will be housed in the learning library, that's up and it has a roof on. Of course, it needs the finishing touch.
Well, I think they're doing a wonderful job, and I don't have anything to wish them except more success and greater expansion.
Thank you, Mr. Cain, very much.